I don't know anybody in my life that doesn't know someone who has cancer. And it's clear that some of the cancers that we are currently living with are caused by radiation exposure. It's, it really is that simple.
Now I can get into this is where I get into my liberal hysteria. This is where I go into saying, I think our cancer rates are rising because of just the foods we're eating and our use of plastics and things that are not nuclear related at all. So there are more carcinogens out there than just radiation exposure.
So I don't know if radiation leaks from Seabrook are impacting the health of nearby communities such as this one. It's an extremely complex epidemiological problem that, as far as I can tell, has not been resolved. Another frightening prospect that demands our attention is the possible risk of nuclear weapons proliferation.
We don't want Iran to have the same kind of system that we have in Seabrook because of the dangers involved with these weapons-grade materials. Well, any reactor can be modified to produce weapons-grade materials. It's basically all the same stuff. It's all extraordinarily dangerous.
People who think that there is a connection between nuclear power and nuclear weapons are right, and people who say that there is not a connection between nuclear power and nuclear weapons are also, in a sense, right. Nuclear power stations themselves are actually not a huge proliferation concern. It is true that technically one can make a nuclear weapon with the spent fuel that's held at a nuclear reactor site, but this is extraordinarily hard to do, and the weapons that you can make are rather unreliable. The big thing that's been in the news recently is the enrichment step of the nuclear fuel cycle, and that's of course because Iran is trying to build an enrichment plant. The problem there is that in order to use uranium in nuclear reactors, you actually have to increase the fraction of the isotope uranium-235. The tricky part is that the technologies that you use to enrich uranium to 4 or 5% are the same as the technologies that you would want to use to enrich uranium to, say, 90%. And if you do that, it's actually a perfect weapons material.
A nuclear weapon attack would truly be a nightmare. There are potential political solutions to nuclear weapons proliferation through international cooperation, although I wish there was more public pressure to make this a high priority issue. On the other hand, the problem of nuclear waste is a stubborn chemical reality. Reactors produce elements such as radioactive plutonium, an extremely toxic substance.
For every pound of plutonium generated in 2008, 24,000 years from now, 1/2 of that original pound is no longer toxic. The other half is just as toxic as it was the day it was fissioned back in 2008.
All of the nuclear waste from the entire U.S. industry for the past 50 years, for all 104 operating nuclear reactors we have right now, fits on a football field 7 yards high. I mean, it's really not the mountains and mountains of waste that people describe.
So now we have this extraordinarily toxic stuff. What do we do with it? Well, the sort of fascinating, darkly fascinating answer to that question is we still don't know what to do with it. The first material that was fissioned during the Manhattan Project in the midst of the Second World War, we still don't know what to do with that. There is no final resting place for this stuff.
Recently, there was an application put in for the Yucca Mountain, if you've heard of that. It's about 100 miles outside of Las Vegas. And so that's going to be our geologic repository. That's where we intend to send all of the nuclear fuel once it leaves the nuclear power plants. We have a spent fuel pool at each power plant, but those pools are filled. For every year that we delay the opening of Yucca Mountain, we're adding something like $500 million to the bill of storing on site at these power plants. So there's real market reason, real economic reasons for why we should be dealing with this.
The United States does not actually own that land. That land was granted to an Indian tribe 150 years ago. And now that we need a place to locate our highly toxic stuff, we want to put it on this Indian land. Well, those Indians aren't very happy about that. The state of Nevada isn't very happy about it. And the state of Nevada's senator is the majority leader of the Senate at this point. You know, he's vowed that Yucca Mountain is never going to open, and I hope that he's right. because it's not going to work. We need to find a better way to deal with the waste.
The arguments over Yucca Mountain are numerous, both scientific and political. But the disagreements point to what an incredible challenge it is to isolate nuclear waste for 1 million years until it's no longer radioactive. There is an idealistic solution to the nuclear waste dilemma. We could burn up the most radioactive waste through reprocessing of the used nuclear fuel.
95% of the volume is still usable energy. It's something that you can still split and release even more energy. Only 5% are the waste products. And that 5%, which they call the fission products, which is what's left over after you split a uranium nucleus in half, is only radioactive for 300 years.
In the nuclear industry, we don't see ourselves 50 or 100 years down the road using the same sort of once-through fuel cycle that we do use today, which basically just puts the fresh fuel in the reactor, burns it once, and then lets it sit. Hopefully we would have some sort of disposal method for that fuel. In the future, we see ourselves obviously taking that nuclear waste and then recycling it. So that would obviously be much more sustainable.
With reprocessing, you wouldn't need to isolate the waste for 1 million years. And reprocessing might solve the problem of scarcity of uranium in the future. But this promising solution has some major drawbacks. It would be extremely expensive to implement, and it increases the danger that nuclear materials could be used as a weapon.
The process that's commercialized right now and is used in France and now Japan is the same one that the United States invented during the Manhattan Project to strip out plutonium for plutonium weapons. So what you're doing is you're stripping out things from the spent fuel and you can make new fuel from it, but there's the issue that in the process you're actually getting a very pure stream of plutonium that's very good for making weapons.
Sometimes it seems like the debate over the safety of nuclear power could go on endlessly. There are so many complex issues, and no agreement over the empirical reality of the facts. The one issue that keeps coming up is the problem of what to do with the waste. Chris Nord is renovating his house, with occasional help from his sister Jessie. They are reusing old wooden clapboards for the exterior of the house.
The M.I.T. engineering professors might want their students to believe that the nuclear waste issue is well in hand, but the fact that there is a football field's worth of nuclear waste piled 8 feet high should not be reassuring to the American public. That's actually a great deal of volume for a substance the likes of which should not even be on the surface of the earth. So, for us to try to refute these claims in sound bites is extraordinarily difficult. It's frustrating.
Surprisingly, even vocal critics of nuclear power, such as Wedge Bramhall, respond well to the promise of technology and public policy to manage all of the risk.
Well, the reason I'm not totally against new nuclear power plants is because new technologies is coming along every day, and pretty soon there might be a way to neutralize all this heavy waste, and that's my biggest concern is the waste that's left over. We've got over 1,000 tons here in Plymouth of high-level nuclear waste, the worst crap you could have anywhere. Even if Yucca opened tomorrow, we don't have enough room to put half the stuff we already have at the nuclear plants. So I say if they can find a place to build these plants, huge, build 3 or 4 of them in one spot, 200, 300 miles away from the population, keep the waste underground where it's safe and nobody can get at it, I got no problem with that at all.
But I have to question the promise of managed risk, especially after the information that Mary Lampert has revealed about the inadequacies of the Pilgrim Plant's aging management program. As long as the profit motive influences these corporations to lower their costs, they'll be pressured to spend less money on reducing risk. So how can we trust in their safety?
It's a beautiful day and there are lots of small children enjoying the beach, young mothers, pregnant women. All the most vulnerable. The water comes up to the beach, the tide recedes, whatever could be in the water then is what? Airborne. And so we hope nothing is on the beach that shouldn't be on the beach. But again, we have to know for sure. And so they should put in a requisite number of monitoring wells that are appropriately placed. And so these pipes that will be 40, 50, 60 years old. I mean, pipes, they're likely to corrode. I know that. That they'd pick it up in time to be able to fix it.
Mary Lampert is still waiting for a judgment in the hearing, but so far, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has granted a license extension to every nuclear power plant that has applied for one.